In our last request, we created a summary report and showed how we can move that information over to Excel to make some additional changes. In this tutorial, we're going to look at creating what's known as a crosstab report, which is a special type of report which shows the relationship between two different variables. In this case, we're going to use cars, color, and possibly sales in a intersected report, kind of like exactly like it looks kind of like what a spreadsheet looks like, but with a little bit more ease of use. So I'll click on New. And in this case, we're going to choose the crosstab report. And you can see an example here of where we are looking at crosstabs of the details of what we're looking at, of a crosstab between car salesman name and then the month sold up on top. We're going to do a slightly different report in this case. We're going to do the average sale price of cars by each make for each year between 1994 and 1999, or whatever our data provides to it. So I'm going to choose OK. And when we build a crosstab report, this is where we really see a big difference in the designer. In this case, we'll provide it with a standard name here. And we'll give it a nice name of, sales price by make. Now when I click over to select data items, this is one of the areas that's a very live area. I can actually choose my options in here. So I can choose what my row columns are going to be. And in this case, or I can click over to the select data items tab and make the change here. Whichever you prefer, you can actually understand how the request is going to be built. So in this case, what we're going to say is for each car make, pull this list down, and as I make that change, you'll notice that it appears in the downside here as well. I want to show the average car sales price. And now I can choose for each what, and down in this list, I'm going to choose the car year. So now I'll be able to get a much better feeling for how the average car sales price that I'm selling each of my cars are based on the year from which they were provided. Now, if I just take this information the way it stands right now and run it, Foxfire generates a crosstab report information, and it will show it to us. Here's the Acuras, here's the AMCs. I'm starting off in 1973, where we do have one Ford, and it's jumping around a little bit. We go from 73 to 75 to 76 to 77 and so on. When you're building a crosstab report and previewing it on the screen, there are two different dimensions to it. One is how many pages are there. In this case, we can go down to the very bottom of the page, and you can see that we end with our UGO. So all of the car makes fit onto one page. What didn't happen, however, is that we stopped in 1980. We didn't really get a good feeling for all of the cars. We're just looking at those individual ones up till 1980. So to move to the next level, I click on this icon right here, which allows me to go to the next strip in the crosstab. And this needs to get generated. And once it's generated and previewed on the screen, I can now see from 81 to 87 and more of the details. This is because a crosstab report is very much like a spreadsheet in the sense that you never know how many rows and columns you're necessarily going to have. And as a result, you can use these buttons here to transform between each individual page, and you can use these buttons up here to transform between what we call the different strips of the crosstab. Let's come back into this. Back in our designer, when we were looking at some of this information, we can actually take this one step further. We can actually add in row and column summaries. So maybe it's not just enough to know that in 1980 or 1973 we sold a particular car. Maybe we also need to see the summary of it so we can actually see what is the total average price or the total cars sold during that one given period. We can also come under the option here and change the sort in ascending or descending order. In this case, I'm going to click over to Filter, add a filter in here, and I'm just going to say that we only need to see cars where the make is, well, let's make it after a certain period. Let's make it after 1980, where we have a few more pieces of information of what we're looking at. So now I've added my items to my filter criteria to my request. I'm going to run this. And as I run this request, I'm still going to have a few number of strips that are on the report, but now I can see a little bit more detail. You can see now that the average is 7,000, BMW is 600. I'm not seeing any data in here, but I am seeing some of the data that's further down below. This is something where obviously you might decide to change it into a report that's running in a landscape format, or in a portrait format. Now, when I'm looking at this, I might decide immediately that, I just need to put it over to a spreadsheet. In which case, once again, similar to what we did the last time, I can choose spreadsheet. And there are different types of spreadsheets that you can put it out to. So in this case, I'll just choose the standard Excel, and I'm going to have it launch it so we can see the content of it. When I click on Send, it's asking me once again for the file name, and by default, Foxfire wants to put it into this output directory, which is a standard default that you set up for each individual user. But this can be overridden and changed to go to whatever file area you want to put it out to. So now I hit Save, it generates the file one more time, and it outputs it out to Excel, so I can now open it and view the file in Excel as I need to. Let me just open it up in Excel. Notice that when I did it, I didn't tell it to launch, and so now I'm going to have to open up Excel. And using Microsoft Excel, I can manually open up that file and make additional changes to it. So, this file. Crosstabs. Here's the details of our request so that we can actually make additional changes and run additional types of reports. Trying to build up different graphs or different types of scenarios. It's important to realize that if you think you're going to be making multiple calculations, the Crosstab report is limited to only one calculation. In this case, the sum of average car sales price. If you decide that you need to actually do a little bit more with it, you might decide to instead to build a summary report and export that information over into Excel or into what's called an Excel pivot table, something that we'll talk about in our next demonstration.